We've got our first speaker on the line, who is Aderinokun, speaking from Nigeria, where she's a front-end developer for big cable media. Irie is going to be talking about using Jekyll for rapid CSS testing. Over to you, Irie.
Okay, so as they've said, my name is Aderinokun. I know it's quite difficult to pronounce, but I'm going to be talking about how I use Jekyll for rapid CSS testing. So just a quick introduction to myself. So like I said, Iri, and I'm a front-end developer, and I'm based here in Lagos, Nigeria. So it's actually nighttime where I am right now. And I work as head of design and product at Big Cabal Media. So it's just a media company based here in Nigeria, which is creating content for African audiences. So apart from that, I am also a blogger. So I write a blog which is called Bits of Code, and in it I write weekly articles about front-end development, and I try to really delve into little quote-unquote bits of code and try to help other people understand how it is, and also try to get to grips with it myself. So through working on this blog, I find myself doing a lot of CSS, because in front-end development, that's probably one of the most complicated things that we work. I find myself trying to really understand how different CSS properties work and how their different property value combinations interact with each other. So one example is last year I was writing this article which was about controlling typography in CSS. And I was talking about how there are 18 typography-related CSS properties and how we can use them to achieve a lot of nuance in when we're writing CSS. And I was trying to explain how all the different properties and the different values compare with each other. So one thing I did was I created these tables where I listed all the property values and had an example. And I got a lot of good. It was really a great way to just easily visualize how these and their values interact with each other. So as you can see, I also did for letter spacing, white space, and all of that. So as you can see, it's a really good way to, once you just look at the table, you can really see how they interact with each other. And the way I did this actually was just completely manual. So as you can imagine, it took quite a bit of time. But later on, box, and as you probably know, and there's lots of new properties, lots of new values for them. And in fact, there are 12 new properties, on average have 5 values each. So that was 48 new combinations to learn, and how am I going to learn all of this new information? So comes in, and I found a way to use Jekyll to kind of automate the process. So I could, first of all, abstract all the pairs into a separate file, so a JSON or file, and use Jekyll's templating to be able to create demonstrations for each property value pair. So I created this site, and I'm just gonna show. So it's called cheat sheets, and I just have some very different cheat sheets for different things. So this is the one for flexbox, as you can see. So first of all, I have this table where I just have all the properties, and you can see a description for them, and then all this. And below that, for each particular property value pair, I have an example, so you can see how each of them works. So for example, you can see the difference between flex really clearly. And when you get to the way more complicated ones, so flex direction, you can very, very easily and visually see the work and how they're different and how you can use them. Because it's one thing to just be able to read the documentation and it says a block level flex container box, but it's also great to be able to do what that means. So I'm just going to show you how I use how I use Jekyll to achieve this, and I'm going to start with something a bit more simple. So here we just, this is basically install. I've just made a few modifications. So for one, I've removed the post directory, which you'll see, and I've replaced it with this cheat sheets custom collection. And I've also removed things like the about page and the feed and things that we're really not going to use right now, but is in the collection. Are to be able to customize how you use Jekyll, because by default it comes and it assumes that you are using it as a blog, but you can actually change it, use it as different things. So I removed the post directory and I created a new custom collection, which is the cheat sheets one. So this is basically all you need to create. And I also cheat sheets folder. I've just set that all the files by default will have the layout of cheat sheets. So that just saves me having to, if I go here, cheat sheet. So it's just by default. So, and then the index, I'm just going to loop through all the cheat sheets, so through all the posts. You can loop through your custom collection. So that's just, but there's nothing there right now. So if I just refresh the page, it's just this text align, which is this, but there's nothing on the page right now, as you can see. So the first thing I do when I'm creating this new cheat sheet is work with the data file. So in the data here, which is just line property. So there's only one property that we're working with at the moment, as I said, which is text align. So, but in future ones, we're going to show how you can use it with multiple properties. But this is just to start with. So we just have the property, a description of it, and then we have an array of all the values. So here we have left, right, center, justify. And I've also added this, which shows that this value is the default value. So what I want to do is hook it up to this data file. So I'm just going to add data underscore file text align. So at the moment, that's not really going to do anything, because what we want is to cause all the property value and cheat sheet layout. What I want to do here is just put, I'm going to have a table here. So let's just put a comment. I don't have to write it out all over again. Okay, so I'm just going to explain. So this is just a section, just so we can have everything sectioned. So we have this table, and in the table, the description and the values. So if we go back here, we can see what we're creating. So property, description, and what we're going to do is loop through each property in the line one, but in the future we'll have different ones. So I've just put it there to loop through each of the properties, and then we're choosing which file to loop through from this place here. So we loop through each property and then set what it is, and then in the values column we're going to loop through each of there. So you can just ignore this bit for now. This look at here. So we're just going to loop through each value and put it there. So if I go back here and refresh the page, now we should get this property, the description, and all the values. So that's just how we create this table, so we can easily see everything that's related to this cheat sheet. But in addition to that, we also want to have the demos. So below here, instead of just having hello world, we want to have actual examples of each of these values. So what I'm going to do is in the text align file, world, I'm going to add another section. I'm going to get it from here. So again, here we're just creating a new section, and I've just titled it details to show that we're going into detail value through all the properties. And like I said before, in this case, you only have the one property. Then after the new, we're going to look through each of the values for that property, and then we're going to have this div. This is where we really need to focus on. So this div is where we have the example, and what we've done is set to the property and the values. So by doing this, what we've just done is added the style so we can see its effect in the cheat sheet file. So if I save that and I just go back here, so now we can see the difference here. So we've looked through, which is text align, of the values. So each of these blocks represents each value. So we have its text align left, and then we have the demonstration. So what I've done is I just added a paragraph here, and that's what I'm using to be able to tell the text align. So we have left, right, center, and justify. So this is one way we can just easily see how all these different property value pairs are different from each other. So that's a pretty simple example. Now I want to show you how it works when I'm going to create another file. And I'm going to show how it's going to work with when there are dynamic values, because here there's a property dynamic, so it could be just a length value, so a pixel unit. So we can't say everything's going to be there. So what we're going to do is have this here and position. Data file. Let's rename that. Oh wow, a lot of typos here. Cool. So I'm just going to show you what the data file looks like for this one. So similar to the text align one, we just have the object fit property just has some contain, cover, scale down, and none. And I've just added some descriptions for each of the values as well, because some values aren't necessarily just easily able to tell what. So unlike text align, where you can see the value, know what it means, whereas for this object fit one, it might not be as clear. So you can also add descriptions. And so here we have this property, the object fit property, and then we have a second property, which is the object position. And here the values are dynamic. So what I've done is I've added this new key value, dynamic values, and knows that the value for this property isn't something that's specified. It could range from a variety of different things. And then instead of putting, so the value is now the position, and then I've added an array of examples. The value is something that is dynamic. See some examples. So if we go back to cheat sheets here, we have object fit and position now. So now we can see here the table, and similar to text align, this just has the property, description, values, and this one is the static values. And then for object position, now we can see why here, if we go. So what I added here was that if it's a dynamic value, then I want to, we're going to show you some examples. So that's why this is different. So it shows the actual value here, and then it shows some examples here. So once we've done the overview, now we want to have the demos. So if we go back here, now we want to add something similar to what we did here. But obviously, because this is a different property, we want to test it in a different way. So I'm just going to get here. So what I've done here, the this part is all the same as the text. The only thing that's different for this one is div. So here we're still looping through all the properties and then looping through each value for each property. So for here we have a different example because obviously just having some text isn't going to be a good way to be. So what I've done is just I've added 3 images because the object picked and object position properties are to do with how an image is contained within its container. So I just added 3 images, and each of the images has a different dimension. So one is a square, one is portrait, and that's how I'm going to be able to show this example. So if we go back here and refresh the page, so now you can see. So first of all, the object fit property for each value. So for object fit fill, it says the replace content is sized to fill the element's content box. And now we can see with the 3 different examples, and you can also see why it's useful to have had these 3 different examples. We can see how it works. So we have this, then we have object fit contain, and we can very, very easily see, visually see what the difference is between each of these values. And then here, for the one with dynamic values, you can also still see that we're still looping through the values, which are the examples, even though it's still a dynamic value. So you can see here. So finally, I'm just going to show you how the flexbox one works, which is obviously the most complicated. Let's just create a new file. Flexbox. So if I go back to the home page, yeah. So because I've already put so this is the data file. Now this shows how we can do things even more complicated because there are different properties item. So what we can do here is in a description and values, I added this custom values, so it applies container, or if you scroll down here, it does apply to the flex item. So that's just another way for me to be able to tell things that are specific to these list of properties. So all the properties here, the description, and then all the values again. So we can also see here the values for here, and then for the values, I'm using the examples. This applies to flex container is useful is because what I'm going to do here is instead of just having all the properties grouped in one flex container, ones from the flex item one. So in this place here, I'm going to have a slightly different demonstration file. Here, what ones I'm still looping, but for this section, I've decided that only the flex container properties are going to be here. So I just did a simple if statement. If it applies to the flex container, and then we can have this. And so we're looping through the values again, similar to the rest, and then we have this example. Okay, so what I was just how I have 2 separate files, 2 separate sections here. So this one is only looping through properties related to this one here is looping through properties related to flex items. And here I also have a separate example. So instead of applying the data from the data file to the flex container, I'm applying it to a specific flex item. So if we go back here, we can see how this works. So here we have the flex container properties, and we can clearly see how everything is working here. So this div that's dotted is the flex container, obviously. And we can see how all the different values affect the flex items when they're being applied to the flex container. So we can see the difference between row and row reverse, or column and column reverse. If we go down, so to the flex item properties, now what we're applying the style container stays the same, and we can now see the difference that happens when the different styles, so align self auto or align self flex start, are being applied to this particular div. Pretty much it, and that's what I like to do when I'm trying to really wrap my head around something really new. And as you probably know, there are lots of really complicated CSS properties, and when there's just a lot of different things and it can be a little bit overwhelming, it's just a good way to just put it all in a very structured file and find a way to loop through them and just be able to change. That's a good way to just test very rapidly and Jekyll. So let's see.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ari. We've probably got time for a couple of quick.
Yeah.
We've got time for a couple of quick questions. Yeah, so it was really interesting seeing how you connected the data files in the front matter. You're sort of doing these lookups. Have you found any sort of limitations with this approach?
Not really. The first time I tried to do it, so site.data page.data file, but that wasn't really working because you had to, because it was obviously a string. But I think it's been fine. There might be certain circumstances in which I wanted to use something a slightly different layout, so I would just create a different layout for it. But I think it's strange, so to just say, and that kind of helps by just moving, for example, that big table at the beginning into the cheat sheet layout.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you have any future plans to improve this website?
I want to obviously add a lot more to it. So whenever I come across something different, I want to add to it. But I was also thinking about how I could add more information to it as well. So instead of just maybe just also be able to have like an introduction or have more information on it. For example, like support for specific properties. So maybe I could just add more information to things. It's also just something to flesh it out a bit more.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. I'm really excited to dive in and have a look and play with the source code. It looks like a really interesting project. And thank you so much for speaking today.
Thank you. It was great to be on here. Everything is on GitHub, so you can just check me out there. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.